Hello everyone. This is the first part of a two-part reflection, a journey between philosophy and spirit. We're not here to deliver answers. We're here to open doors, to ask deeper questions, to feel what words don't always explain, to listen with presence. So take a breath, slow down, let this be a quiet moment. Just for you, let's begin. There are questions that arise before words, before the mind learns how to organize thoughts. They seem to live inside silence itself. Who am I? What moves me? Is there something beyond what I can see? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're spiritual, they're existential. They are the meeting point between reason and mystery. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what if the why also escapes? What if all we have is an emptiness that reveals itself right when life goes quiet? That's when many of us come into contact with something that has no name, something you can't measure, can't prove, but you can feel. Philosophy seeks to understand the world. Spirituality often seeks to belong to it. One looks from the outside in, the other from the inside out. And when they meet, something powerful happens. Pure thought, alone, can become dry. Feeling, without reflection, can get lost in fantasy, but together they form a path of depth. Rumi once wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." This is more than poetry, it holds an ancient truth, that within each human being there is a reflection of the whole, a center, a spark. Jung called it the self, the psychological and spiritual center of being, the deepest part of us, the one that observes everything, yet isn't thought, isn't emotion, isn't body. It is the inner space that stays even when everything else changes. Spirituality begins when we look within. But philosophy arrives when we ask, what is this within? Is it the soul, the psyche, consciousness? Or is it just a comforting illusion? To help us bear the vastness of the universe? The answer perhaps doesn't come ready-made, and maybe it doesn't need to. Clarice Lispector once wrote something that always touches me. "I am as you see me. I can be as light as a breeze, or as strong as a storm. It depends on when and how you see me pass." This idea of multiplicity, that we are many in one, that the self is not fixed, is profoundly spiritual and at the same time philosophical. Because if we are not something fixed, then we are always becoming, and to become is the verb of the soul. Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." That strikes deep in those who have felt the world demanding too much, yet offering so little meaning. Many arrive at spirituality through pain, through exhaustion, through an urgent need to reconnect. Others through beauty, through the silence of a mountain, the gaze of an animal, the touch of the wind on the skin. And here lies a paradox. Philosophy asks, spirituality listens, philosophy analyzes, spirituality contemplates, philosophy seeks the light of understanding. Spirituality often kneels before the mystery, and that's not weakness, that's surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that opens space, that accepts not everything must be explained, that some things only make sense when we stop trying to understand and simply live. Fernando Pessoa in one of his most spiritual verses, wrote, "To feel everything in every way, to live everything from all sides, to be the same thing in all possible ways at once. That's the invitation of the inner life, to be everything you are, even if contradictory, even if incomplete, even if imperfect. Because the Spirit doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. Have you ever just gone quiet and listened to what pulses inside you, not your thoughts, but that silent depth where words do not reach? That space where sometimes you feel a tightness and other times an unexplainable expansion. There lives something that may never be named, but that is real. This text, this speech, this reflection doesn't aim to answer, it only wants to open doors. Inner doors, windows to the invisible. Because maybe, as Jung said, he who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. And maybe awakening is just that, to open your eyes to what cannot be named, but which, even so, calls you every day. Have you ever tried to be silent? For real, not just keeping quiet, but going silent on the inside? Turning off the voices, the one that judges, the one that compares, the one that demands, the one that remembers. Plans, just being there, breathing, present. It's hard, right? We're surrounded by noise. The world is always shouting, and even when the world goes quiet, our mind keeps yelling. But what if silence isn't an absence? What if it's a living presence? In many spiritual paths, silence is more than a practice. It's a portal, a gateway between the visible and the invisible, between the surface self and the deep self. Krishnamurti said, "Truth is a pathless land. Maybe silence is the only real pathless path." In silence, things ripen. Have you noticed? Sometimes answers come, only when we stop asking. The mind thinks it can solve everything, but some things are only revealed in silence, not as words, but as sudden clarity, a calm recognition, a soft inner knowing. Silence can be scary because there are no distractions. When everything outside goes quiet, what's left is you, and it's hard to run from yourself, hard to pretend, hard to hide in silence. What's hidden comes forth, and that's not a threat. It's an invitation. The Buddha found enlightenment in silence, under a tree. No books, no advice, just observing his thoughts, his breath, his feelings, the rhythm of existence, and there, something opened. Something beyond words, beyond explanation. That's why so many masters speak so little, or use metaphors, or answer questions with more questions, because mystery cannot be translated. Language tries, but it always misses something. Fernando Pessoa said, "To think is to be sick in the eyes," maybe because thinking too much blinds. It keeps us from seeing what was always there, what only shows up in silence. Have you ever walked in silence? No phone, no music, no talking, just you and your steps. At first, your mind races, but slowly, time slows down, the world changes shape, the birds, the wind, the sound of your own footsteps. It's not magic, it's presence. Simone Weil said, "Absolute attention is a form of prayer, and silence is the purest attention. When you go silent, you pray, even without saying a word, even if you don't believe in anything, even if you don't know who's listening, because prayer is being there, saying, I'm here, I'm listening. And silence answers. It speaks, it heals, it reveals softly. True spirituality begins there, not with dogmas, not with formulas, but with silence, with inner space, with listening. Call it God, the universe, the soul, the fertile void. It doesn't matter. The name doesn't define the experience. What matters is feeling touched by something that cannot be explained. So today, if you can, close your eyes. Let the thoughts pass like clouds. Don't fight them, but don't cling to them. Breathe and just be there, where the nameless dwells, where everything begins and everything dissolves. Silence is not absence, it is origin. No one wants to suffer, it's natural. Pain scares us, loss paralyzes, absence hurts, emptiness consumes. But what if I told you that suffering, as painful as it is, can also be a portal? Nietzsche once wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." It sounds poetic, and it is, but it's also deeply real. Chaos breaks us apart, but also reveals us. It reveals what we couldn't see, what we tried to hide, what we ran from. When everything feels fine, we move on autopilot. But when pain arrives, we are forced to stop, to listen, to look. And that look, even if painful, can transform everything. Carl Jung once said there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and he added, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, because facing the soul means facing the shadow, that part we hide, even from ourselves, old wounds, unhealed grief, deep-rooted fears. But it is exactly there, in the shadow, that healing begins. Spirituality is not a way to escape pain. Often, it is the path through it. It's looking at the pain and saying, I won't run anymore, I hear you. Stay, if you must, but teach me. Show me what I need to see. Show me who I am, without the armor. In many sacred traditions, suffering is seen as a trial, not as punishment, but as a rite of passage. Moses, in the desert, the dark night of St. John of the Cross, Plato's cave, the crucifixion of Christ, the Buddha, sitting in silence under a fig tree, all of them, in their own way, faced a breaking point, a moment when everything dissolved, so that something deeper could emerge. And this is not about romanticizing pain. It wounds, it burns, it can devastate. But ignoring pain numbs the soul, and when we numb ourselves, we drift away from who we are. Maybe the way forward isn't to avoid suffering, but to change the way we walk through it. When we suffer, we slow down, we see more honestly. We begin to shed the masks. Pain doesn't accept performance. It cuts through illusions. It brings us face to face with what we most avoid, the truth about ourselves. And what's beautiful is, even inside the pain, there is light, there is presence. Have you ever seen someone who has suffered deeply speak more gently, listen more patiently, love more softly? Pain, when faced with awareness, softens the heart, and a softened heart can love for real. Have you ever felt a pain that later became a turning point? Something that felt like the end, but was the beginning? Something that shattered your outside, but rebuilt you from within? That is the movement of the soul. It grows through paradox. It expands, right when life feels like it's closing in. And that is spirituality in motion. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, said, "It's not what happens to you that matters, but how you respond to what happens." That is not passivity. That is wisdom. Pain is not optional. Suffering often can't be avoided, but the way we look at it, that changes everything. Some pain you no longer need to carry. Others may walk with you for a while, and that's okay, not as punishment, but as a reminder that you're alive, that you still feel, that something is still moving inside you. Pain can be a teacher if you let it. If you listen, it doesn't come to destroy, it comes to cleanse, to make room, to wake you up to yourself. And when it gets too hard, just remember, this too shall pass. Everything passes: time, the body, life. Nothing is fixed, but what you learn from pain, that can stay, and that can change everything. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for staying, for listening, and for sharing this moment with me. If this reflection touched you in any way, feel free to give it a like, and if you'd like to walk more paths like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's still more to come, and I'd love to have you with me. Until next time, take care and keep listening to what cannot be named.